The American Superstore. One-stop shopping for everything you could ever want or need.
Given Superstore is mostly about retail, do you think there's an absolute worst type of customer out there in the universe?
Ooh, I mean, I feel like we see all of them on YouTube, don't we? It's like people of Walmart or whatever, you could just YouTube it. People are the worst, right? Like, especially when they feel like entitled to service.
The closest thing I ever did was waiting tables, and there's so many versions of awful people there, to a point where I believe every single American, at least, should be required, like community service, to do at least 6 months in a restaurant, whether it's in the back or the front or whatever, because so many people are so awful in restaurants to servers.
I worked in retail in real life, and my absolute nightmare of a customer are those people who return things constantly. Because I worked in fashion retail, and people were just wearing things and returning them all the time, and I was like, girl, this thing has stains on it, okay?
Well, I think the worst type of customer is customers who have no idea what it is that they want. They kind of walk into the store and they haven't thought ahead about what it is that they're looking for. When I look at it when I'm at a fast food restaurant and I'm standing behind somebody who's taking really long to order, and it's you know what's on the menu, you know what they serve here. Have your order ready before you get up there.
I mean, I have worked customer service jobs in restaurants, and I have worked retail before. The absolute worst kind of customer is probably the kind of customer where you just can't imagine them having any friends, because they're so disrespectful or angry, those kinds of people that are really reactive. But also, I've probably been a horrible customer at some point too. So no judgment, we all have our bad days.
Well, having worked retail in real life as well, I have to say I think the worst customer is the entitled customer, because if you're working at a high-end place, that's annoying. It's somebody who's entitled. But when you're working at a place where you're making just barely minimum wage and there's somebody who is really kind of wanting a boutique experience, that's truly infuriating. I mean, for me, I used to work at a footwear department of a Zellers, which is a Canadian department store like a Walmart. And the attention people wanted to me fitting their feet on shoes, I'm I make $6 an hour. I can't help you,
Do you have a favorite gag or joke that you've ever done in Superstore?
My favorite gag?
Or joke that's ever happened?
On Superstore?
Yeah.
Oh my God, there are way too many to count. Colton is the prankster or the jokester of the set, so he kind of likes to pick on Ben. And so I kind of just sit back and watch what happens.
So I heard from a little birdie that you're kind of a prankster on set. Is that
a little bit?
true?
Yeah, I like to do pranks,
Yeah.
sure.
Particularly on Ben?
Oh, definitely on Ben, yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit on
there's just certain people in this world that it's fun to prank, that they're kind of, you've seen him. I mean, he's just fun to pick on the guy. We've done a number of pranks. A lot of them entail, we have these whole standees that fans can take pictures with. And so I like taking the Ben standee and setting them up in, just different awkward positions and places around the set or on the lot. He's just a fun guy to make fun of, and, there's nobody who deserves it more than Ben Feldman.
My favorite prank I've pulled is on Ben Feldman. Ben Feldman is a food snob, and I was taking a trip to New York, and he sent me a text and said, where are you eating tonight? What reservations you got? I said, don't worry, I've got reservations at this great place. And I just took a picture outside of an Applebee's. And he's like, no, you're kidding. And then I went inside and did a photo shoot with menus. And so then he's like, wait a minute, is this real? And then I was like, don't worry, I'm going here for dessert. Took a picture of a Chili's that I was walking by, and then Googled and found a picture of a sundae, and I was like, this is what I'm eating right now. And he bought it. And he was like, I can't believe you're in New York City. There's so many great restaurants. You're eating at Applebee's and Chili's. And then I FaceTimed him, and I was like, no, you dink, it's a prank.
So we've been hearing from people all day that they like to prank you on set.
Colton.
No, more than Colton.
Really?
Another little birdie told me that they also like to prank you.
But they don't. I mean, I would tell you if they did, and it's almost exclusively Colton.
Yeah.
And look no further than his own social media in general, which relies almost entirely on crucifying me. So, great. Look, Colton needs me for his own identity. That's great. But no, there's not a lot of pranks on our but I get there's a lot of ball busting.
Given that Amy is kind of the anchor on the show, have you given any thought to where you would like her character to go by like the end of the series?
You know, we've had some of those bigger meta, like what's the end of this story for Amy, but it's easier to have the conversation about the season. You know, like last season we talked a lot about challenging her to step up and go through the growing pains of like asking more from her life and from her work and from her family life, and that was really fun, and it brought through a lot of awesome storylines for Amy. The maternity leave episode was one of my favorites. Her becoming a manager and having to deal with being a boss of people who used to see her as an equal and sort of not apologizing for how much money she's making now. And so all really meaty storylines that I felt really excited to play. This season, I don't know for sure because it's being written, but we've definitely set up a complication for Amy because she's a manager, and personally, she's getting more out of her career for the first time in her life, but now she has this conundrum of the workers and her work family and her friends and her loyalty to them versus her own career and trajectory and how she's going to balance those things out. So I think that's going to play a big role in the next season.
I think there's going to be some very interesting dynamic changes for Jonah and Amy this season. I mean, there's a lot changes. There's a lot to end with such darkness and emotion in the show and in the store. It's kind of like my mom used to do tarot cards, and she would deal like the death card, and I'd be like, oh no, that's terrible, and she's like, no, that just means it's kind of like an erase of starting over. And a lot of this feels like we kind of got a death card at the end of last season. So we'll see. I don't know. We haven't. We'll know a lot more in like a week.
Your character kind of had a big moment at the end of last season.
Season 4 finale was a little bit of a crazy shocker. So,
how was it filming something that was less comedic?
It was a difficult. Like the script was. When we did the table read, it was really hard. I after we read it, like I turned to my right, and like America and Lauren were just like in tears, and filming the episode was really sort of difficult. It was very triggering, and I don't know. It was just like, but it was a hard week, but we got through it. I remember filming one scene and looking out when I was inside the van, and like seeing all my other coworkers, and they were just like crying. I was like, I don't think they're acting right now. I think it's like real. It really hit us.
Well, I've been told that I'm gonna have a 21st birthday party, so that should be like cool to see how crazy Cheyenne and her friends get to go when they're finally legal.
Do you know anything about what's coming next?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to the writers and we've talked about, how we're gonna pick up on all the storylines that we left off on, and yeah, but I can't give away too much here,
You could tell us.
The truth is I don't know anything like for sure. It's all happening still.
Just more of the same. Garrett likes to do as little work as possible and have as much fun as he can, and that's what I'm going to do.
Listen, we're in the dark. We don't know what's happening. We start shooting in a week and a half, and we have yet to see a script. The actors are the last people to find out what happens on these shows. What I can hope for is a romantic interest. I've been campaigning for it for a while. I think it's time. Obviously, I think bridges have been burned with Garrett after, the birds and the shoes and all of that stuff. So I'd be really interested in her getting some sort of, really serious arc of a love interest.
Okay, so in terms of love interest then, like what kind of man do you think, or woman, do you think would be the perfect person for
I feel like it would be hilarious if it was like a Chase Crawford type, you know what I mean? Like a very pretty, very young man, but I think ultimately who Dina needs is like a Jeffrey Dean Morgan, you know what I mean? We need like somebody who's a little bit older and is not going to take her BS, if you know what I'm saying. I think that's always what I find interesting. I'm like, I want to see her interact with people that make her lower status, because thus far we've seen nobody make her vulnerable in that way, and I think that would be, all jokes aside, very interesting.
Are we getting overtime for this?
Definitely not.
This actually counts as your lunch break.
What?